Boundaries, the structural expression of self-definition. Communication makes your internal position visible. A boundary gives that position structure. You can say something is uncomfortable. A boundary determines whether you continue participating in it. You can explain what you need. A boundary defines the conditions under which your participation remains available. Within Altus human systems, a boundary is a clear definition of what you will or will not participate in. It may define access to your time, energy, attention, work, privacy, property, emotional availability, relationships, or conversation. A boundary is not primarily a command telling another person what they must do. It defines your participation. That distinction is essential. Request, preference, boundary. A request says, "Would you please lower your voice?" A boundary says, "I will not continue this conversation while I am being shouted at." The request asks the other person to change. The boundary defines what happens to your participation if the condition continues. A preference says, "I would rather not discuss this." A boundary says, "I am not available to discuss this." A warning says, "If this keeps happening, there may be consequences." A boundary identifies the consequence clearly. "If this continues, I will leave the conversation." The other person remains free to continue. You remain free to leave. A boundary does not remove their authority. It clarifies yours. Boundaries must account for reality. A boundary is not a declaration that physical limitations no longer exist. Employment agreements, financial dependence, caregiving, shared property, legal responsibilities, and other obligations can restrict immediate choices. You may not be able to leave a job today. You may not be able to end a complicated agreement in one conversation. You may have responsibilities that cannot simply be abandoned. The useful question is not, "Why can't I completely remove myself?" It is, "Where can my participation become more accurate within the reality that exists?" A boundary may be immediate. "I am ending this conversation now." Practical. "I will complete my current responsibilities, but I am not accepting additional work." Informational. "I do not discuss my private life in this setting." Or internal. "I will not reverse a decision solely because another person disapproves of it." All four define participation. Why boundaries trigger guilt. Boundaries expose the definitions operating underneath behavior. A limit may activate beliefs such as, "A caring person is always available." "If someone needs me, I must help." Saying no means abandonment. "Their needs matter more than my limits." "If they are upset, I did something wrong." The boundary challenges more than the immediate situation. It challenges identity. If value depends on being useful, a limit can feel like becoming less valuable. If identity depends on being agreeable, disagreement can feel like failure. If safety depends on preventing conflict, a boundary can feel dangerous before anything has actually happened. The discomfort is real. It is not automatic proof that the boundary is wrong. Guilt is information. It is not a verdict. A boundary still has to be evaluated. Is it clear? Is it realistic? Does it honor genuine responsibilities? Is it proportionate to the situation? Are you willing to maintain it? Those questions matter more than whether the boundary feels comfortable. A boundary is not control. A healthy boundary does not require another person to become smaller so you can feel safer. "You cannot speak to anyone I dislike" is control. "I will not remain in a relationship under this condition" is a boundary. "You must stop talking about this" is a demand. "I am not participating in this conversation" is a boundary. The difference is structural. Control attempts to determine another person's choice. A boundary defines your response to that choice. This also means the other person remains free to reject your conditions. You may say, "I am not available for daily contact." They may answer, "I want a relationship with daily contact, so this does not work for me." Both positions can be valid. The relationship may simply be incompatible. A boundary does not guarantee preservation. It reveals reality. Boundaries reveal compatibility, care, and compatibility are not the same thing. Two people can genuinely care about each other and still require conditions the other cannot provide. Without boundaries, this can remain hidden. One person agrees repeatedly. They appear easygoing and generous. Internally, they are exhausted and resentful. The other person continues making requests because those requests continue being accepted. Eventually, the first person erupts. "You take advantage of me." The other person may be inconsiderate. They may also reasonably answer, "You kept telling me it was fine." Both people have been participating in different versions of the relationship. A boundary introduces accurate information earlier. "I can help with this part. I cannot take responsibility for the entire thing." Now the other person can accept, negotiate, find another solution, or become disappointed. Whatever happens next is based on better information. That is why boundaries do not automatically block connection. They make connection more accurate. A meaningful yes requires a meaningful no. If no is not genuinely available, yes loses information. A yes given from fear may be compliance. A yes given to prevent anger may be self-protection. A yes given because refusal feels impossible is not organized the same way as a freely chosen yes. This applies to time, work, relationships, privacy, physical contact, emotional labor, conversation, access. A meaningful yes requires the existence of a meaningful no. Boundaries preserve that distinction. Boundaries require action. A stated boundary is communication. A maintained boundary is structure. If you say, "I am not available after 10," and continue answering every call after 10, the other person learns that the words do not describe the actual conditions. If you say, "I will end the conversation if insults begin," and remain while the insults continue, the boundary has not yet become action. This also affects self-trust. Your operating system receives the contradiction. "I say this is unacceptable, but I continue participating in it." A boundary therefore needs to be realistic enough to maintain. Dramatic statements are not stronger boundaries. Precision is stronger than severity. Instead of, "I will never speak to you again," an accurate boundary may be, "I am too angry to continue this conversation. I will reconsider it tomorrow." The strongest boundary is not the harshest one. It is the one that accurately defines participation and can actually be enacted. Consequence is not punishment. This distinction matters because punishment is frequently mislabeled as a boundary. A consequence follows from the conditions of participation. A punishment is designed to make another person suffer, submit, or regret their choice. For example, if you are more than 20 minutes late without contacting me, I will continue with my plans. That defines how you will use your time. Compare it with, if you are late, I will ignore you for 3 days so you understand how it feels. That action is designed to produce distress. A label does not determine the function. Ask, am I defining my participation, or am I trying to control this person through fear, deprivation, or emotional pressure? A boundary can absolutely have consequences another person dislikes. The issue is not whether they dislike the outcome. The issue is what the action is designed to do. Explanation is not permission. Boundaries do not require silence. Context may matter. A work agreement may need explanation. A close relationship may deserve relevant information. Shared plans may need discussion. The problem begins when explanation becomes an attempt to earn permission. You can say, "I cannot attend because I have another commitment." That is information. You do not need to produce 12 additional reasons until the other person approves. Relevant explanation supports clarity. Over-explaining often reveals a hidden belief. My limit becomes valid only when the other person agrees with my reasoning. It does not. Responsibility still has limits. Boundaries do not erase legitimate responsibility. Someone may genuinely depend on you. The relevant question becomes, what does responsible participation require, and what does it not require? Caregiving may require substantial involvement. It does not automatically require unlimited availability. Work may require flexibility. It does not automatically require accepting every demand. Supporting someone emotionally may be appropriate. It does not automatically make you responsible for stabilizing every emotional state they experience. A useful boundary distinguishes what is mine, what is theirs, what is shared, what is outside anyone's control. Responsibility without definition expands indefinitely. A boundary gives it shape. Compassion and boundaries can exist together. Compassion and boundaries are not opposites. Compassion recognizes another person's experience. A boundary recognizes capacity and responsibility. Both can exist in the same sentence. I understand that this is painful, and my answer remains no. Acknowledging disappointment does not require reversing the limit. Caring does not require assuming ownership of another person's reaction. This is one of the central skills of stable boundaries. Allow the response without surrendering the information. The other person can disagree. They can call the boundary selfish. They can say you have changed. They can prefer the previous arrangement. Their response is information. It is not automatic authority over your participation. Boundaries can change. A boundary is not a permanent monument. Capacity changes. Circumstances change. Relationships change. New information appears. A conscious revision is not failure. The question is, did the conditions change, or did pressure become uncomfortable? Suppose you ask for a week without contact. After several days, you feel clear and genuinely choose to reconnect. That can be a conscious revision. If you abandon the boundary 10 minutes later because the other person became angry, a different mechanism may be operating. The external action may look similar. The internal organization is different. Flexibility is useful. Collapse under pressure is not the same thing. Internal boundaries matter too. Not every boundary involves another person. You can define participation with your own patterns. For example, I will not reread this message repeatedly after I have answered it. I will not make major decisions while panicked. I will not use someone's silence as permission to invent a complete explanation. I will not answer a request immediately when I need time to evaluate it. These boundaries define what authority a state, impulse, habit, or expectation receives. They still require action. Put the phone down. Wait before deciding. Gather information. Return to the request later. The purpose is not flawless self-control. It is increasing consistency. Rigid self-punishment is not a healthy boundary either. Boundaries should be proportionate. Not every difficult interaction requires complete removal. A misunderstanding may require clarification. A first mistake may require repair. A repeated pattern may require stronger structure. Some situations may require ending participation entirely. Context matters, frequency matters, impact matters, responsibility matters, willingness to change matters. Boundary culture becomes distorted when maximum severity is treated as maximum self-respect. Precision matters more than force. The boundary should fit the condition. Boundaries and the human operating system. A boundary is the physical expression of internal organization. Belief influences what you define as acceptable. Identity influences what you believe you are allowed to require. State affects how you respond. Expectation influences what consequences you fear. Communication makes your position visible. Choice determines whether the position becomes action. Within the parallel reality model, boundaries express compatibility with a direction. If you prefer honest relationships, your participation must contain honest information. If you prefer self-respect, repeated participation in conditions you define as unacceptable creates inconsistency. If you prefer conscious choice, yes and no must both remain available. A boundary does not control the reality another person chooses. It clarifies the reality you are willing to participate in. A simple boundary check. Choose one situation where you repeatedly experience resentment, pressure, exhaustion, or confusion. Ask, what am I continuing to participate in? Keep the answer specific. For example, I keep answering calls after the time I need to rest. I keep accepting additional work without discussing capacity. I keep discussing something I have already said is private. I remain in arguments after insults begin. Then ask, What have I actually communicated? Maybe nothing. Maybe you made a request but never defined a limit. Maybe you stated a boundary but did not maintain it. Now ask, what condition of participation would be accurate and realistic? For example, I will not answer non-emergency calls after 9. I can accept this task only if another deadline moves. I am not discussing that subject. If insults begin, I will end the conversation and reconsider it later. Then ask, what belief makes this boundary difficult? They will think I am selfish. They will leave. They will become angry. I will no longer be needed. I should be able to handle more. That belief reveals the consequence your system is attempting to avoid. Finally ask, am I willing to allow the other person to have a response while maintaining accurate information? That is where the boundary becomes more than language. The core distinction. A boundary gives structure to self-definition. It identifies your capacity, your availability, your responsibility, and the conditions under which your participation remains available. It does not guarantee agreement. It does not eliminate consequences. It does not control another person. It makes your communication and your actions consistent. A request asks someone else to change. A boundary defines what you will do. And once that boundary moves from language into behavior, choice becomes physical reality. That is where action begins. If this work is useful, help us grow it. Altus is still a small channel, and every subscription, comment, question, and share helps this information reach farther. If there's a pattern you want examined, leave it below. Stay stable. Pay attention. Reality is speaking.